Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is very good to be back with you this time talking about this really important issue, the futures of teaching. We know that we are living in an interesting time, and we have said it so often, it's the new normal. But what is this new normal? And what will teaching and education be like within this new normal and after this new normal, whenever that is likely to be? So we have a number of guests this afternoon. Julie Robinson, Chief Executive Officer, Independent Schools Council. Professor Dame Alison Peacock, Chief Executive Officer, the Chartered College of Teaching. Dr. Deborah Outhwaite, Director, the Derby Teaching School Alliance, and Alana Gay, Head Teacher. Alana will join us shortly. And of course, I am Paul Miller, one of the chairs this afternoon with Dr. James Lane, who is the other chair. According to the United Nations, COVID-19 has fashioned the largest disruption to the global education system in history. This, as a result, has caused havoc on the lives of nearly 1.6 million students in over 190 countries. Approximately 94% of the world's population of students has been impacted, and in low and middle income economies, up to 99% of students have been affected by COVID-19 in terms of their schooling. In some countries, the regular September start has not occurred as yet, and some countries are considering doing it online. And in the UK here, we are in a transition, doing it a bit of a blended online and face-to-face where possible. But what is important within this discussion as well is that, and this has been noted by Human Rights Watch, is that school closures has also exacerbated previously existing educational inequalities. And we haven't really had a chance from research to measure this as yet. But one thing we do know is that we are pivoting towards an important point in our history. And for sure, a generation of young people appear to be stuck in a rut, largely caused by COVID-19. So to help us understand the impact of COVID-19 and its effect on teaching, and the massification of technology in learning brought about by COVID-19, and issues around the recent exam fallout on Black Lives Matter, we have assembled this august panel of speakers to help us to unpack some of these questions. So, colleagues, welcome and thank you for joining us, both online and to the panel. And colleagues online, can I encourage you to post your comments in the chat and your questions so that James and I can curate these for our speakers. I want to start off by asking our panelists, how are schools and other institutions coping with the return to school? I think that is an obvious place to start. How are schools coping with this return to school? Alice, you want to take that one? Or Julie, you're yes.
I think there's absolutely no doubt that schools are under enormous pressure, and we know that they're adaptable, we know that schools are innovative places, but we know that they're busy at the best of times. So where we'd hoped that this term would see a little bit of what we used to think was normality, now the issues with testing and waiting for advice and waiting for results and the enormous anxieties that parents and some staff and pupils are bringing into school. It's creating additional pressures. And I think in many schools, SLT, SMT staff are spending time on track and trace, and it's just soaking up their mental energy. So there's an enormous amount of pressure on school staff, school leaders to get it right first time in complex circumstances, very, very high stakes. They're trying to track mental health issues and safeguarding issues. They're just feeling under enormous pressure. Now, some schools are managing to sort of innovate their way out, but I think a lot of schools are still in crisis mode right now, and deserve all the support and encouragement they can get, in particular from governors and the whole school community. We need to be working together.
Thank you, Julie. Would anyone else like to come in on that, Alice?
Yeah, so I fully agree with everything that Julie has said. I think particularly school leaders are in the situation, as a school leader, parents come and speak to you, members of the community look to you, particularly in primary school, because very often in primary school, you're the only person they can go to. In normal times, you probably can't get an appointment with your doctor. So who do you go to? Unless you've got a faith, the next person you would speak to probably would be your head teacher. And head teachers have to absorb a tremendous amount of anxiety across a community. They listen to things, they try and advise if they possibly can, but there's an inevitability about absorbing the anxiety that comes to them. When we think about head teachers who have been running their schools, albeit not fully open, but they've been running their schools since the beginning of the pandemic, whilst also trying to balance the requirements of future staffing, whilst also trying to support those youngsters who've been in school, whilst trying to deal with the plethora of conflicting advice that's often emerged from government and then being superseded the following week, whilst also having to present as knowing what they're doing. There's and their own. I think it would be perfectly fair to say that probably every one of us on this call and every one of us probably listening to this seminar is experiencing an underlying anxiety because we're in a global pandemic. We don't know what's going to happen. And although we try and carry on as best we can, albeit by screens or however we do things, that anxiety as it relates to our family, our family's futures, to things that may be happening around us is very real. And although we try and mask that and behave in a very calm, professional manner, the reality is, I think that adds to the fragility of the situation. Add on top of that, the fact that you've got to wipe all the desks and make sure the cleaners are doing what they're doing and encourage everybody. And there's a lot there. So I really, really applaud absolutely everybody in our schools. And of course, it goes way beyond the school leadership team. It's everybody who's in our schools, everybody who keeps our schools open. But it's ultimately the head teacher that's responsible for that whole team. And that's quite a job at the moment.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, James.
Thanks, Paul. Paul mentioned the disruption that we've had to our education system, which has been prolonged in a way that we've never seen before. So that disruption has brought some challenges, but can it bring us some opportunities as well? So my question to you is, how has COVID-19 changed the face of teaching and school leadership? Now, I'm going to borrow a phrase from our colleagues at the Education Development Trust, and they talk about the way we can adopt, adapt, or abandon in school leadership and teaching. We can adopt completely new practices that we never even dreamed about before March. We can adapt the things that we're doing based on the new information and systems that we've been toying with for the last 6 months, or we can abandon stuff we've suddenly realized we've done forever, but we're pointless. So, Deb, could I start with you and your Teaching School Alliance? Is that a handy way to think adopt, adapt, and abandon?
Yes, I'm part of the early rollout of the Early Career Framework with Education Development Trust. So I've been doing a lot of work with their team recently. And one of the things we've been doing is modelling good behaviours on Zoom and sending out Zoom etiquette notices to people. And I think it's really interesting, the research that we're starting to do into this, and Paul and I have a colleague at the Open University, Dr. Jacqueline Baxter, who's starting to collect some of the research data on this. And I think from my point of view, in terms of training quite a large number of teachers into the system every year, and obviously watching those trainee teachers being kind of unceremoniously thrown out before the Easter holidays because they weren't considered key workers, they weren't able to carry on with their placements, you know, they weren't covered under school insurances. So it was really interesting about how we then had to learn to adapt very quickly to that and what we abandoned as a consequence. So if you abandon classroom practice, suddenly you're re-evaluating which bits of classroom practice are really essential for teaching and for training teachers well and effectively. So it's a really useful adage, actually, and it turns out that there are lots of other ways that we can train teachers very effectively. You know, all of our students last year qualified. Yes, they're the 1920 COVID generation. They all got jobs. They've all gone on this year to do, you know, different practice in different ways, but actually because of what they've experienced, they've been very well set up for the last couple of weeks, the bubble closures and everything else. And we have an incoming 2021 intake that we're adapting their training. And when I trained to teach 26 years ago, my training wasn't entirely in the classroom in the way that our School Direct program is now. So there are effective ways of training people to teach so that they stay in teaching that perhaps doesn't involve such long placements and traditional placements in the way that we would consider them.
Thanks, Deb. Alison, what are you thinking about the way that the face of the classroom and school leadership might change going forward on the back of the disruption that we've had?
Well, I think the first thing to say is that when schools fully reopened, teachers were overjoyed to be back with their children and young people. I mean, they just were. It's been lovely to see. And in fact, even our sort of sulkiest teenagers had to admit that maybe they were quite excited about being back in school. So I think that human connection that we have in the classroom is something that we really love. We like to be together. Human beings like to be together. However, having said all of that, you know, the last few months have also shown us that there are other ways that we can connect. And being able to, for example, this session now, you know, being able to talk to each other and to have colleagues listening and hopefully asking questions and engaging means that we're not limited to people who live in the locality of the event. So certainly at the Chartered College, where previously we'd tried to provide professional learning opportunities across the country, very rapidly, we realised obviously we weren't going to be able to do that. And so we started to provide a series of online seminars, some of which attracted thousands of participants. And that for us feels like something that we will probably want to adapt and adopt in the future, because to learn and to communicate and to listen to each other is far more possible. And the technology existed, of course, prior to the pandemic. But it's like anything, isn't it? Never waste a good crisis. So we've had the crisis. Let's learn from the opportunity to connect in this way. But there's nothing to replace human contact. That is so valuable, so valuable.
Thanks, Alison. And on the comments, there's a bit about, you know, can we abandon a lot about the current system and introduce some better ways of doing things? And people are talking about that. But I think one of the things that I'd like to pick up on is the disruption has caused some of us to be a little bit more worried about children and teachers' mental health and well-being. Julie, where are we with that? And is there something that Ofsted or the government should be doing that they're not currently doing to help with teacher and pupil well-being?
Yeah, because of the pressures and the enhanced anxieties that we're all living with that we've described, it's important to be able to look after each other. You know, this is a very human industry that we're working in. And yeah, I mean, one of the big messages that's coming out from schools is please dial down inspection. You know, they know they're accountable, take their work very seriously, and this just is not an appropriate time to be reinstating inspection across schools. You know, it would help to take that pressure away as far as is reasonably possible. We're talking about what's adopted. I was talking to a group of heads yesterday, and they were saying, actually, on the positive side, online open mornings, online parent consultations, they feel genuinely are here to stay, by way of, you know, saving travel time and perhaps even the opportunity to engage parents who haven't been as engaged as schools might have liked. So, you know, there are positives we can be adopting, but it is all putting pressure on schools, and because they're having to blend, as you said, they're not all in school or all outside of school. Teachers feel they're having to try and do two things at once. So anything that supports their well-being through, I think, coaching and mentoring as well on a personal level, anything that can be done to support from person to person is going to be helpful. And perhaps something, you know, here's an opportunity again at system level to develop partnership working across groups of schools. You know, some schools are in formal groups, some aren't, but all schools have something to share. And, you know, just by sharing the shared experience of the current pressures, I think that can help alleviate some of the worries that schools are suffering, all the teachers and the support staff in schools. So I hope that a growing opportunity will be partnerships between different types of schools system-wide.
Thanks, Julie. And just a quick one on that from you, Alison. Are the Chartered College bringing any pressure to bear at system level about the pressures on pupils and staff?
Yes. So I personally have spoken to the Chief Inspector. I've tried to express those concerns that Julie so eloquently just described. I think it's really important to realise this is not about schools wanting to hide. It's about an essential sort of set of priorities. And ironically, you know, when you are responsible for a community, you're responsible for their health and their well-being and their emotional safety. Just maybe Ofsted isn't as powerful as it perhaps has been in the past. Perhaps that's not the worst thing that could happen, you know? And I think that's, in a way, ironically, that's a good thing, because we shouldn't have a profession that is driven by inspection. We should have a profession that is really proud that we are doing the right thing. And I think that we do that by working in collaboration, by learning from each other, which is exactly that collegiate approach, which is so enabling and powerful. And we shouldn't be driven by being worried about being found out, you know. The reality, of course, is that it is inspection, league tables, all of these things that have been present in the past and have driven us so much. Maybe these are things that we need to recalibrate and think about differently, because we do have, when we look at international surveys, we do have amongst the most unhappy youngsters in the world. Surely this time when we've really had to value and recognise what's important in our lives is a time when we can start to say, well, what might we do differently? So I hope that this is an impetus for change.
Thanks for that, Alison, and I couldn't agree more. And Penny on the chat is pointing out that a lot of teachers during lockdown took the opportunity to improve their own CPD. So many good things came out of that time as well. Paul.
Thank you, James. Interesting. Now, I've seen so many wonderful examples of head teachers and schools working flat out, trying to organize teaching and learning in ways that protect the students and staff from exposure to COVID-19, from, you know, organizing year groups, sessions to intensive teaching days, and all kinds of approaches that people are trying out with the aim of protecting the health and the welfare of students and staff. And I just wondered, Debs, what extra support might schools need, you know, as they work flat out to ensure that the learners are catered to, but also that the staff are catered to, especially in the midst of what is a rising pandemic, you know, because we've seen that that this is ballooning again?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And I think schools are going to get used to the sort of stopping and starting. We've already seen in our area, you know, we're not that far from Leicester here, of course, who had their local lockdown anyway. So we've seen bubbles coming up, being closed while they wait for test results and everything else. But Penny in the chat is absolutely right. You know, the take up of CPD this summer from teachers has been huge. And Alison well knows there is a thirst there for teachers to engage in high quality CPD that is meaningful to them. So, for example, I run a small education charity, and we delivered the equivalent of a year's worth of our services in the first month of lockdown for free for teachers. Those courses were full, and we had great feedback. And it's about people realizing where their skill set is lacking. So online pedagogical awareness, and being involved in that, and being, you know, thinking about what best works with their own students. And of course, the way in which we respond to that nationally in the debate with the digital divide that we have. So I received a survey link from my own primary school with my youngest child today saying, how will you, if we lock down again, how will you be accessing this? Is it a laptop? Is it an iPad? Is it an iPhone? We're trying now to put things in place that suit the format that children have at home. And of course, we've still got to be very aware, particularly in the sort of city that I work in, that that digital divide is very real, and we're, you know, really polarizing our levels of inequity in society by people not having access to that. And schools have gone to tremendous lengths in lockdown. I mean, I work with a range of different primary schools who photocopied huge amounts of resources and delivered them by hand round to schools. You know, there's all sorts of work that's being done for that purpose, but a lot of that is about teachers, as Alison says, knowing and working with their own communities, but also upskilling so that they can cope with it. And I do think our younger teachers, our teachers that are currently training this year, are going to be really good at that. You know, they're used to going into Zoom breakout rooms. It's what they're spending their life doing at the moment. And there's a whole sort of, you know, upskilling process that can happen there.
That's very helpful, Deb. That's very helpful. Thank you. One of the things that, coming back to what James said earlier, that I have observed in my interactions with head teachers over the last few weeks, is that they're under considerable strain, and I wonder. I don't know the answer, but I wonder what systems, you know, should be put in place to support head teachers, because they are carrying this huge amount of weight. And I do think we talk about, you know, the head teachers, some of them working right the way through the pandemic, but nobody talk about their well-being and their mental health. I was talking to a head teacher a couple of weeks ago, and he said to me, I feel really happy having the opportunity just to speak to you, because many times head teachers are not listened to, just not, you know, you're just blamed and named and shamed and all of that kind of thing. But so the support mechanisms for head teachers, especially at a time like this, what might these look like, and who should provide these? Alison?
Well, I'll make a start. So for the really extreme cases, we have the Education Support Service, which is a fantastic free counselling service for colleagues. But in many cases, probably people don't feel they're quite at that point. And I would really recommend that head teachers, particularly head teachers, but anybody who's feeling anxiety, find someone to talk to. So, you know, it would be brilliant if we had a national kind of coaching service, but we don't have that in place at the minute. And certainly the Chartered College doesn't have the resource to do that. But we do, on the other hand, have a tremendous number of very willing colleagues who would be very happy to help and to be a listening ear. And I think, I mean, even just personally, what I've started doing, and I started this right at the beginning of the pandemic, is for those colleagues who are on Twitter, I just every morning just try and send a message that is encouraging, that helps people to think, yes, I can do something that makes a difference. Because when the pandemic started to, as you say, to sort of balloon again in the last couple of days, this is frightening news for everybody. And we've been told by government, you know, we hear that the Prime Minister is adamant that schools must remain open. And so teachers have got to carry on going into school. And this is frankly a scary time. We can't do anything about that. But what we can do as individuals is we can try and reach out to those around us who we can make a difference to. So we can choose to smile, and we can choose to say to people, how are you really? And I think if you are somebody who is, you know, you've had a bad day, I see people posting on social media, can I just DM someone? You know, I think it's really important that we all help each other, because there is a collective human need here. Education, if it's about anything, it's about that sense of collective purpose. We want our youngsters to do really well, but we also recognise that they only flourish when we flourish. And so if our teachers and our head teachers are under strain, our young people suffer. I think I would want to make a plea to, maybe, who knows, maybe there's somebody from the media listening to this broadcast. I think if the media could be more celebratory of teachers' hard work, that would be a fantastic thing. And if parents could also try to see the good in what schools are doing, because quite often as a parent, you know, the time that you are moved to pick up the phone or to go and complain is because something has gone wrong, even if 99% of the time everything's going right. So I think it's really about how we try and help each other ease the pressure all around, because this is going to be with us for some time, it would appear. And we need to find a way to get through it, don't we?
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you, Alison. Julie, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, I just wanted to say something about the importance of the role of governors, school trustees, you know, the employers in this. And if you're a teacher in a school, there is a way of contacting the governors to flag appreciation for what the school leadership is doing, and encourage those governors and trustees to support the head. It takes a bit of pressure off the head and a sense of accountability during crisis, because, you know, it is hard to get all of this right. And for heads who feel supported by their school governance mechanism, I think that can make a huge difference. And there are some schools I know where they've appointed a governor in charge of well-being, staff well-being across the piece. And that's really reassuring for the school community if governors and trustees are able to come into the school and thank and congratulate. Just, you know, it doesn't take away the workload, but it makes everything a little bit more bearable.
I think you're absolutely right. That's really, really so important that head teachers and teachers feel valued and feel as if, you know, their work is recognized and they are supported and they're not alone and they're not at the dumping ground of everybody's frustration. We're going to move the discussion forward a little bit to look at the massification of technology in education. And I'm going to come back to you on this one, Julie. It's a great opportunity. You know, so many people are using the technology. We are reaching so many people in ways that we haven't been reaching people before. And this, as we have seen, is leading to what I would consider a new educational practice, a practice of hope and a practice of innovation. And I just wonder, how might we prepare teachers and schools and parents and families for this new educational practice? Because this new educational practice, in a sense, was thrusted upon us. And we talked about the inequality earlier with some schools, some families not having the computers and so on, and some schools not having the infrastructure. So whilst there is this new educational practice, one of hope and innovation, I'm just wondering if there is more that needs to be done from different parts of the sector to galvanize on those positive things.
Yes, and you started by talking about the disruption caused, and you're right, it's been like a massive global enforced experiment in EdTech, hasn't it? And people like me have had to just get over their technophobia and do things like this, and there are opportunities in that. Yes, you're right, that the infrastructure is the important first step. I'm a governor at a school in Islington where they have managed to ensure that every pupil has access. They have Wi-Fi, they have a device, and that's step one. once you've got that and you've got teachers who are willing to engage, suddenly the opportunities to share all the best practice online means that actually you can take pressure away in terms of developing content and planning, because you can start creating extended networks in various areas. So yeah, there have been some examples of schools putting particular subject areas. There's a maths, a physics, and some languages examples where they've been forced to put their GCSE course online, and then they've been able to share that across all different kinds of schools. It doesn't matter what kind of school. There are state schools, maintained schools, who have done brilliantly online, and there are independent schools who have started seeing how helpful it is to just open up and share in all sorts of ways. So here's our opportunity. Yes, we should enter into that gladly, not competitively, but for the greater good, and see what we can achieve. And you know, for us at Independent Schools Council, this is an opportunity, because for the last 5 years we've been developing a website called schoolstogether.org, collecting examples of maintained schools and private schools working together on a whole range of projects, just sharing all sorts of things, academic, but also sports and music and CCF and all sorts of facilities and resources. If that can develop, we've got 5,500 examples online on Schools Together now. Imagine if that developed tenfold and everyone was able to sort of reach across from school to school. There was no barrier. So I know in A-level teaching, there's often a lack of people with, say, physics degrees. But if you had to teach physics and somewhere on this network you could find someone who's a real specialist and can help in those areas of the A-level syllabus that are really niche, then suddenly what you can offer your students becomes even richer, even broader, even better quality. And it would be great to get to that place. And I feel like we are moving towards it now, because we've been forced to notice these online resources. So that's quite an exciting opportunity. But yeah, we owe it to the children actually to share our best practice. It's important.
Thank you very much, Julie. Deb, did you want to come in on that one?
Yes, I'm really pleased to hear that. I'll have a look at that website. That sounds fantastic. I was involved in the Education Action Zone work about 15 years ago, where we were trying to bring independent schools and maintained schools more closely together and share resources and facilities then. So that's really good. I think we do have, as we've said, lots of opportunity around this, and sharing where you have less expertise as a system. And Julie's example there of physics A-level is a really good one. You know, I run a science learning partnership. We regularly put very qualified staff in touch with schools where they are not able to access such well qualified staff. So I think by enabling better mechanisms, clearly the whole of the system benefits, and that's why we want to collaborate, isn't it? That's why we're in education, to collaborate and move that forward, particularly for STEM subjects. And I think, you know, the fact that we're all now being forced, as Julie said, to engage with technology, you know, that's pushing that desire of STEM learning forward, and that's got to be a good thing. You know, when the recent drive for computing was rolled out, so few schools could actually bid for the computing contract because they didn't have computing departments. The staff were not on the ground in the schools to be able to bid for the contracts. So anything we're doing as a society to kind of upskill who's involved and connected with schools has clearly got to be a good thing.